everyone, and welcome back to the third and final day of our training webinar series for HP Vertica 7. We're back here with Kate Fontanella from the training team and Ron Cormier from the professional services team to walk you through how the management console in Vertica 7 has been improved and built on from the previous versions, and essentially how to use it. So we'll hand it over to Kate.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back. We're going to talk about the management console and the database designer, and I think this is really the key feature that you're going to see. I'm going to go through today just looking at some of the monitoring pieces to the management console, but then I'm going to look at how you can tune your queries using the management console, because now you can run explain plans, you can run profiles, you can look at your execution engine events, and you can run the database designer through management console, and that's what we're really going to do. So today's session is actually going to be a live demo. So I'm just actually going to minimize here my PowerPoint, and I'm actually going to go on to some VMware. And I will preface this by telling you that, this will be a live demo. And so we're hoping that I've practiced this and everything is going to go smoothly. There may be a few little kinks in the way because it is a live demo, so I ask you to please be patient with me. What I am doing here is showing you this from a virtual machine. So you will notice a little bit smaller screen, and I do apologize for that. But this is how the virtual machine will go. So the idea here is to show you going into the management console from the web view and getting a login screen. And they are going to try to zoom it up for you a little bit so you can see the screens a little bit better. So one thing I just wanted to point out and why I started at the login screen is when you set up your management console, you probably want to set up your own management console admin. Rather than using the username and password for your DB admin, you may want to set up like something like MC admin, just so that you have a different admin login for your management console. So when I log in, this is going to be the first thing that I see. And for those of you that have seen Management Console before, this should look familiar. It's got a new skin to it, but pretty much this is what we had before, where you could look at your database clusters, you could go into your message center, do some settings for your Management Console, and look at some diagnostics. I'm going to start off by going right into the database cluster. When I'm brought in here, I'm going right into the database that I've set up. And you're going to notice that there are really three buttons when I click onto this. I can view it, I can stop it, I can remove it. I do want to point out that if you remove something from Management Cluster, you're not removing your whole database, you're just removing it from the view of Management Cluster. So do keep that in mind. I'm just going to click onto the View button here. And when I do that, it brings me into this Overview screen. And again, there's some really important pieces to this Overview screen that are really going to give you a nice, quick look at what's going on in your database and an idea of what you can see to quickly just open it up on a daily basis and see what's happening. One of the things that's very nice, of course, is it's going to tell you whether your database is up and running and how many nodes you have. This is a 3-node cluster, and so you can see that there are 3 nodes and they're all up. You're going to notice that I've got some messages in my message center. A couple of them you'll notice I have some critical and some emergency ones showing up, and that's because I powered off my virtual machine, and of course when I powered it back up, it had to bring it all back up. So there were some critical moments in the system, and so you're going to see those messages kind of popping up. If I click onto this critical, it's going to give me that message, and it's talking about different levels of what was going on, and this is really just due to the fact that, of course, I powered off my VM, and so my whole system was down, and so, Node 1 got up, but then Node 2 hadn't finished getting back to the screen. So that's why I happen to have those messages in there, but it's a great way to kind of see how you can look at the message center and just know right away what's been going on in your system. The other piece to this overview, I'm just going back here, this other piece to the overview is the Workload Analyzer. And the Workload Analyzer first loads in the Management Console when you load the Management Console, and then it'll run every 24 hours. Now, in this case, I haven't run it, so I don't have any messages in here because it hasn't run today. But if I click onto my Analyze button, it's actually going to run through a process and see if there's any recommendations that it might make. And unfortunately, it looks like it's still refreshing the data and looking at it. So you can see that it's going to give me some tuning recommendations for my database. This is really helpful. And really what this is doing is just pulling from some of the information that's in the tuning system table. But the idea here is that it's going to give you some recommendations that might help your database run more efficiently. So you'll see the first one is to analyze statistics. There's some tables out in my database where I haven't analyzed my statistics, and so it's telling me you should analyze your statistics. Why do we need statistics? Because it's going to help the query optimizer choose the best projection for the query that you're running. And if you don't have the statistics up to date, it may not choose the best projection, and so your queries aren't going to run efficiently, and your whole system won't run efficiently. So again, that's just a nice reminder. There's also some examples here where it's telling me to run the database designer. This may be that a couple days ago I ran some analytic queries on this database, and maybe I didn't have the best projections, and the workload analyzer is recognizing that and telling me this table needs better projections. I've run a few queries against this, and it needs some better projections. So again, the workload analyzer is going to make those recommendations. Now, we're going to look at some situations today where you can actually use the management console to see that as well, and we're going to go through some of those processes. But this really is a great tool for managing and monitoring your system right off the bat, and it's something you should probably keep an eye on. And if things like Analyze Statistics is out there, you really want to make sure that you're getting those run regularly. Now, Ron, I don't know about you because you go see customers in more detail than I do, but I know that in many situations the customers just have statistics run on their system once a week or regularly, some sort of regular system, maybe on some of the off times of the database. Is that typically what customers would do, or?
Yes. Statistics are essential to having optimal query plans. So this, just to point out or emphasize what Kate is saying, the workload analyzer is not something that's run automatically. It's run, you can run it manually, or you can have it run automatically when Management Console is installed. So it's really important to have Management Console. It'll run it once a day, and it actually goes back and it looks at your historical queries that you've run and does some analysis about whether these queries were run as efficient as possible. So just a really good reason to have MC installed and running, and some of the benefits that you can get from it.
Okay. The next thing I'm going to just look at are some of the graphs down here at the bottom, and these approved, I believe it was in 6.1 or 6.2, these graphs really improved. But the nice thing about this view is that you can look at, on this first graph here, we're looking at the average CPU usage and the average memory usage of your system. And it can allow you to go in and you can actually click into these graphs and look at where the spikes are and look at the details of what was going on in your system at that time. So in the last hour or so, you can see it was a pretty even keel on my screen. But in other situations, you might find that you see a spike in CPU usage and you want to know why. Maybe you know why. Maybe you were doing something on a system and you expect to see that. But again, it's just a nice way to just look at a graph and see what's going on. The other thing that you can see over here is the query distribution. And as I was saying, you can click onto these areas and dig into them. So I'm just going to click onto one of these user queries, and it's going to take a little while to load, so just be patient. Again, my system is not super fast because I am running off my local desktop here. But what this is going to do is it's going to go into the activity and show me what was going on with the system. So when you get into this screen, you can see that it just takes you into more detail of what you were looking at previously. So again, you can see the different spikes where queries were going on. The blue area is representing the user queries that were going on. You've also got system queries, and you can also see your CPU and memory usage throughout this time frame. So if you're interested in a particular time frame, you can go over here, and you'll notice by clicking on there, we went from the overview to the activity area. And then you can even take this further, and you can actually click into a specific area and look at specifically what was going on. And as I told you earlier, I was uploading my database, so really what was going on is the system was kicking itself back up, and that's where a lot of these queries are coming in. If this were actually a real analytic query, I could also go in here and it might actually show me my query plan that was connected to it. Because this was actually getting the database up and running, that's not really what we're going to see. But again, once you go back in here, you can look at this activity area and kind of see what's going on with your queries. You can also change this. You can click on this drop-down list. Oops, sorry. My mouse is not working. Give me a minute. Oops. Okay, that's not working. The other thing that you can do is you can always refresh your views, and it's going to give you the latest view. So if you happen to be looking at a different view of this, you can click on the refresh, and it's going to update what's been going on with your query. So if you wanted to look at it in a new view. I'm going to just switch over from the activity area here, and I'm going to go down to Manage. Again, this is really just a nice graphical view of what's going on in your system. If you had nodes down, the node that was down would turn red, and the other nodes would be yellow because they would be sort of in the process of trying to manage what the other nodes should be doing and also in the process of recovery. So these are some of the things that you might see in this view. You'll also notice that you can start, stop, and rebalance from this view. So those buttons are available, and you can do this through Management Console now. So again, you've got your stop, your rebalance, and allows you to see what's going on with your system. The next screen here, this is just your license information. This used to be out there, and you'll notice that my virtual machine is based off the Community Edition, so that's what it's telling me. But this would be just telling you what's going on with the licensing information. Settings is definitely something that you really want to look at. There's some new features in here that I think are really quite interesting. Some of these are the parameters that you can set for your database, and it's going to show you what those defaults are. So, for example, you could go into your tuple mover, and you're going to be able to see what your active partition count number is, and you can see your current view as well as your default view, which is helpful because especially if you're trying to figure out, did I change this at some point, or did I inherit my database and somebody else change it from the original default view, this can be helpful. Again, this is very nice because it shows you your merge out and move out intervals in seconds, so it defaults to 600 and 300. So again, these are the parameters that you could change, and if you went in here and you've changed them from the default, you can see those changes. Another interesting thing I thought was really, this I found really interesting, is just telling you the epic management. So epic management actually tells you what epic you're on. We talk about this in training all the time about epics and the ancient history mark and historical epics and so forth. This is actually those parameter settings, and it also gives you an idea of the epics that you're actually on. In terms of monitoring, this would be what we've always had, the SNMP. You can set up your SNMP traps and have some of those message center messages emailed directly to you, and of course that may be something that you want to set up. Passwords, this would allow you to actually change your password. And again, not everybody's going to have access to every single one of these. You're going to have to give them roles and rights to different parts of Management Console. And when we get to the Database Designer, which we will be shortly, I do want to point out that there is a new Database Designer user, and the resource pool that used to be managed by that is really just there for historical purposes. But now you're really setting up a Database Designer user, and people can actually run Database Designer from Management Console without having full access to admin tools. So that's really going to be the benefit. Profiling. So this is something that we talk about in performance tuning, our performance tuning class, and it's something that you've been able to turn on using different commands and so forth. But now you can actually turn on your execution engine or your query profiling. Again, you want to keep in mind that it defaults to off. And the reason it defaults to off is that this takes resources. When you're running queries, it uses resources, and it also has a space limit. So if you are in the process of trying to analyze what's going on in your system, it makes sense to maybe turn on your global profiling. But if you're not doing any analysis, you more than likely want it off. So definitely keep that in mind. Snapshots is just going to give you some information on your backup systems and just where those are. And okay, and then this is just giving you some license information. What I want to take you to next is, I'm going to skip from design. We're going to get back to that. I'm going to jump over to the explain area. This, I think, is the one thing that I just think makes Management Console worth getting on your system and installing. The idea here is somebody has come to us and said, this query is running slowly, and you want to start investigating what's going on with this query. Well, what you can do is you can go into this explain area, and if my paste is working, we are going to be nice and lucky. It's going to paste right in here. So here's my query. This query we were told was running slowly. So the first thing I could do is run my explain plan. So I click my explain plan button, and what it does, and I will try to scroll down so you can see this, it runs my explain plan. And you'll notice it highlights what projections are being used and gives me the details of a regular explain plan that we're seeing. And some of the things that we might want to notice is there is a hash join going on right over here, and there's a couple of other things. But what's really great is I can also run the profile. Again, remember, profiling a query is actually running the query, so it may take a little time, especially if this happens to be a query that's running slowly. But I really think that Management Console in this new view is really going to give you a reason to do this, because what it's going to show you is this really great graph of what's going on, and it's going to give you what the durations are and so forth. And then even more importantly, which I think is just some really great things, are these three buttons over here. You can view what?
No, you're good.
You can view your projection metadata. You can view your execution events. And I think that this is one of those things, especially when we're talking about performance tuning. This is going to show you what's going on in the execution. It's going to point out to you what areas are taking longer. So if you scroll down to the bottom here, it actually graphs out the areas that are using more memory or using more disk space. And you can really see this graphically. I think this is really the thing, and I'm just going to wait for the screen to just catch up for just a minute. So you can see that it's breaking out each operator, and then if you scroll down to the bottom, it's giving you what's going on with those. And this is really going to help you find those queries and those operations within that query that are making the query run slower. So one of the things that we talk about is if you can find the thing that's making the query run the longest and make that more efficient, you're going to make your whole query run more efficient. And if you can make your longest running queries run more efficient, your whole system is going to run more efficiently. So this is that whole tuning of your queries to make them run more efficiently. Do you want to add some stuff to that, Ron?
Yeah, so a couple of questions that we've been getting in online is around the licensing. So Community Edition has Management Console and Database Designer as part of it, so that's out there for everyone to use. In terms of the deployment of Management Console and some changes about how it is deployed, in older versions of the software, we used to have separate hardware for Management Console. That is no longer the case. Management Console can run on the same hardware that the Vertica cluster is running. Basically, you install it on one or more of the nodes, and it will then query the database to get the information that it needs. So no need for separate hardware. The footprint in terms of resource utilization is minimal, and so that should ease the requirements. And each Management Console can be used to manage multiple clusters and databases. That's not a change, but that's something that's still there.
Yeah, and just to add to that, if you look closely at the screen, I don't know if you can actually see it from up above, but my Management Console right now is just running off of my Node 1 in my 3-node cluster. So I've loaded it on there, and it's just running on my 3-node cluster. So to take this a little bit farther in terms of the profile. So again, the profile is really telling me all the different operators that are going on with this query and giving me some detail about its memory usage, its CPU usage, and so forth. So I get a sense of, when is it using a lot of disk, when is it using memory, and so forth. And then if I decide that I look at this and I think, well, this query is taking a long time, and I think that what really would help is to run the database designer. And again, the database designer should be your first line of defense in trying to optimize your queries. You can run database designer in what we used to call query-specific mode. It's now called incremental mode. And the idea would be is that you run it against a query or a set of queries that seem to be running slower and seeing if maybe designing a new projection would actually make your queries run faster. And so that's what we're going to do right now. I'm going to go over here to this area called Design, and I'm going to load the Database Designer. And when we get in this screen, I'm going to point out a few things just as we're getting along. So you'll notice that I actually, in my first screen here, I ran the Database Designer in comprehensive mode and created my design for my base database. This is what we recommend you do when you run, when you first set up your Vertica system. So that is what I did. And now what I'm going to show you is how to use the Database Designer in Management Console. So right here, I just click onto a new design, and I'm just going to call this VMARC Queries because I'm doing this for a query-specific design. And I'm going to use the wizard so you can see how that goes through. And for those of you that have run Database Designer, this should look very familiar. You should be somewhat familiar. The look and feel is a little bit different, but for the most part, it's really the same thing. Again, the first thing I'm going to do is choose my design type, comprehensive versus incremental. Today we're going to do an incremental because we're going to base it off that query that's taking too long. So I'm going to choose my option for incremental, and then just choose next. And then the next thing that I can do is to select some design options, and I can propose unsegmented projections. And really this is a new feature with the Database Designer. The idea is that it might suggest unsegmented projections for the design tables. So again, this is an option. Ron, do you want to kind of, this new option for proposed unsegmented projections, this would allow for replicated projections. That's what this checkbox is for, right?
Yeah, unsegmented projections are another name for that. It is replicated, where we've got the full copy of the data on every node, and it really just depends on the customer use case, the query workload, the data volumes. But typically, this might represent a slight change in the best practices. We have observed some situations where it's best to just segment all the projections, but again, it's really specific. So most of the time, just going with the default value is your best bet, and then tuning from there.
Yeah. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I've got an SQL file out there that I'm going to browse for, and this is my series of queries. It's actually the one query that we're looking at, but you can put in a series of queries for incremental mode. You can also now use the query repository, which would basically go out and look at some queries that you've been using over time and use that to base its query-specific projections off of. So you can do it either way now, and I think this is a really nice tool, especially if you are sort of in that analysis mode where it's not a particular query, you're just trying to make your system run more efficiently for your query. So I think it's a great option. We're going to use the Browse button here, and I'm going to go over to my class files folder and get my SQL file. So give me 1 minute here. And there's my query-specific SQL. So again, I'm just clicking the Browse button. I could use the query repository if that makes sense. So I'm going to click onto my Next button. And then these are the preferences that you're used to seeing in the old version of the Database Designer. Analyze statistics. You do want to do this. You want to analyze your statistics when you're running a new design because you want your projections to have the latest and greatest statistics available. And then the option to auto-build and auto-deploy. And I'm not going to check those off today. You could auto-build and you could auto-deploy. But today I want to actually look at this process a little bit. One of the important things to remember with the Database Designer in the Management Console is that in the admin tools, the deployment script, the design script, those were stored automatically. Now you have to remember to save and export them. So again, if you're planning on not deploying them automatically, you want to remember to save and export your deployment scripts so that you can get to them, alter them, and then deploy. So do keep that in mind. It's something a little bit different. It's just kind of remembering that step when you're doing it, but it is something you want to keep in mind as you're going along. So now I've got sort of the summary of what I've chosen. Of course, you can always use your back button if you need to go back and change something if you've chosen the wrong thing. And I'm going to click my Submit Design, and it's going to start the process. And this is going to take a few minutes, so we're just going to kind of wait a few minutes while this is running. And in the meantime, what I'm going to point out is while this is in the process and it's going through, a couple of things to remember is, first of all, you can use your Save button here that will allow you to save your design. And if you want to look at what's going on with your submission, there's actually this event history. And this really was kind of the log file that used to show up. But it's really taken you through what the Database Designer is doing. And let's see if we get any. Let's take it a few minutes today. Oh, sorry. I forgot to click Build Design. We didn't deploy. Sorry. So remember that I did stop and I didn't actually deploy. So now what I would need to do is once I've decided I'm ready to go, I click onto my Build Design. And again, I can choose to analyze my statistics and deploy immediately. So again, here I can not deploy, and I can just start. I'm going to deploy immediately now just so that it goes through this process. So now it's going to go through this process and start building the design, and you're going to start seeing those things that the steps it goes through, where it's going to go in, do some analysis, do some building, do some designing, and then over on the right side, it's going to show you what percent completed it is. So this is really that sort of, it's almost like a live log file that's going to go on. And again, there is going to be some delay on this virtual machine, but hopefully we'll get to see some of this. Ron, are there any questions out there about what's going on with Management Console and Database Designer?
Lots of differing questions. So, I mean, there's just questions around DVD and how it works. So there's really sort of not a whole bunch of changes in DVD itself. Really what we're trying to do is provide a front end that is accessible to more people. Previously, you had to, in order to run DVD, you had to open an SSH connection to one of the nodes and have DB admin credentials, and that's no longer the case. We now are able to run DVD, have an interface to it that runs on a browser that many people can access. The permissions is much more granular, and you don't necessarily need DB admin. We have a new role for that. Multiple people can be running DVD at the same time, so that it's not just a one-person activity anymore. So just a much nicer interface to Database Designer that puts the power of Database Designer in more people's hands.
And just to show you, sort of talk about some of the things you're seeing on the screen. So this is the event history of this building of this design. So it starts off telling you the design is in progress. It's analyzing the statistics, and it's telling you where those analysis is. Then it's starting to optimize query performance, and it says it's extracting interesting columns. So it's really taking you through this process of what the optimizer is doing and letting you see exactly what's happening on the screen as it's going on. A couple of things to point out, especially in my virtual machine, sometimes it feels like it's going a little slowly, but up in the right-hand corner, you'll notice there's this nice little green bar telling you it's in progress. So it is happening and working and so forth, and it's giving you some information about that. Another thing I want to point out, if I go over here to the Queries tab, this is that query that was in that design that I was working with. So you can actually go in and see that query because this was in an incremental mode. So these are some of the tabs that you can look at and the event history that's going on with that. And it looks like, did we finish? I think we might have. Design deployed. So we actually got the query out there, and the design is deployed. And we can see that the design in progress is storage optimization, optimizing storage footprint. So now it's going in, and it's actually starting the deployment process. So this is what you're going to see on your screen. And again, it's allowing you to kind of look at what's happening. A couple of other things to point out is you do have your export design tab here. Your deployed, these are really the build, export, deploy buttons. So if you hadn't, for example, if I hadn't automatically deployed, then I could click my deploy button once I'm ready to go. Anything else or any questions out there in regards to what's going on?
There's quite a few questions that we're getting in now about sort of best practices related to DVD and some of the implementation details about how it works. I'm not sure that this is the best forum to go into that because of the best practices can be specific to customer workloads. So the other thing that I'll point out that is new in 7.0 is that we now have an API to Database Designer. And that is in fact what is implemented here. So there's a variety of SQL functions, meta functions that users can call to invoke DVD from the command line, and those are open and documented in version 7.
Okay, great. Okay. So again, this is the management console, and one of the things that I think we really want to say is that this is a great tool. The fact that you can now run it off your existing Vertica, system that you've already got, we really think that this has gotten to that maturity level, and we recommend people try getting this up and working, because it's really a great tool for managing just monitoring your system. But now you can also do things like set up Database Designer users and allow your analysts to run Database Designer for their specific queries, and really get a better design for what they're trying to accomplish. So, and also being able to profile and run explain plans off of this is really helpful, I think, for different users. So again, that is really what we were going to cover today. Is there anything else that obviously the Database Designer is still running. Is there anything else that we might want to bring up? No? Okay. I'm just going to go back to our overview. And of course, while this is all going on, you can see the graphs are changing in the overview screen as we go through this. So that's pretty much it. Are we good?
Thank you very much, Kate. And if anyone has not yet downloaded Vertica 7, you can learn all about it on vertica.com/crane, and then visit my.vertica.com to sign up and get your Community Edition download that comes with the Management Console and Flex tables that we covered yesterday. If you have any further questions as you get started, please post in our community, and that is community.vertica.com. And Ron and Kate can take a look and see if any questions come in related to these topics, as well as a number of our engineers and members of our professional services team are also in there to answer any incoming questions as you get started. So thank you all for joining us today, and look for an email to receive the recordings and any future webinars from Vertica. Thanks again, Ron and Kate.